Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'll call the Board of Selectmen, Town of Wolfeboro, September 27, 2016 meeting to order. Tonight we have a public hearing, and it's to consider the application from Michael A. Simmons for a building permit on a Class 6 portion of Stoneham Road. I'm just going to ask members of the public tonight, as you get up to address the board, that you tailor your questions and your discussion to this particular Class 6 permit, and that we stay on that topic. So I'm going to start off tonight with the representatives from Mr. Simmons on the permit they want to present.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, I'm Jim Rines from White Mountain Survey and Engineering, and I'm here this evening representing Michael Simmons in his request to have the Board of Selectmen authorize a building permit for a single-family home on a Class 6 portion of Stoneham Road in accordance with the Board of Selectmen Class 6 road policy. The property is depicted on tax map 104, lot 11 of the Wolfeboro tax map and is approximately 20 acres in size. Its only frontage is on the Class 6 portion of Stoneham Road. This is a new application for the same property that this board approved in July of 2016, which is the subject of some current litigation. This application, however, if approved, which is a new application, would essentially render that approval moot. We have voluntarily notified the abutters and owners of the property on the Class 6 portion of Stoneham Road. Since we made this, when we made this application, we have received approvals from the Public Works Department, the Fire Department, and the Planning Board had made recommendations to you and issued a non-objection. And we did that before coming here. We've also designed this upgrade to maintain a 12-foot wide travel width for the entire length. The maximum slope is approximately 5.6%, and the least slope is 0.5%, with much of this road being a 3% grade. The side slopes will not exceed 2 to 1. The improvements are all contained within the existing road right-of-way. We have added one drainage cross culvert and drop manhole, which is in this area right here that will come across to the Simmons. This is the Simmons lot here. It will come across to a level lip spreader and run on the Simmons property, and Michael, if this is approved, will grant a drainage easement to the town of Wolfeboro. Based on the prior approval that the board granted, Simmons recorded a limit of liability and responsibility at the Carroll County Registry of Deeds, Book 3286, page 13, which was executed by this board, as well as the Michael Simmons. I believe that you have with you the approvals, but if not, I can give you the approvals from all of the different agencies. I submitted those with my August 25th.
I believe they're in the Selectmen's packets already.
Okay, very good. I also want to share with you just a couple of minutes ago of the site that I think will be helpful. So So as you can see from these photographs, this road is, I drove down there with my passenger vehicle. I had room enough to turn my vehicle around with a single three-point turn. This is not a heavily wooded, very narrow roadway. With modest improvements that we're recommending, this will easily satisfy the criteria that the board issues, and we hope that you would again take action to approve. As part of the policy, you are required to go through sections A through G, and the A is clearing and cutting, and it says that the cutting and clearing shall be limited to the existing travel way. The Board of Selectmen may approve cutting and clearing outside of the travel way, but within the town right-of-way if reasonably required in connection with grading and existing drainage. And because this is a scenic road, in the future, if this is approved again, we would then have a public hearing with the planning board for the scenic roads. But we have identified that there would be 16 trees that have a 15-inch circumference or larger when measured 4 feet above the ground, which would be potentially damaged or removed as a result of this proposal. 15 of those trees are between 15 and 20 inches in circumference, which is 5.8 inches to 6.4 inches in diameter, so they're very small. One of those trees would be set 27 inches in diameter, which is 8.6 inches, its circumference, which is 8.6 inches in diameter. 14 of the 16 trees lie on the southerly side of the road, with only 2 on the northerly side of the road. There will also be some limbing that would be needed to create a safe and suitable access within the 12-foot wide section of the road. And that's why we will be going to the planning board for the scenic roads. Additionally, there is 1 tree within the limits of Michael Simmons Road frontage which will be removed, and that is greater than 15 inches in circumference. It's actually 28 inches in circumference or 8.9 inches in diameter, and it's a white pine. And Michael will also remove approximately 16 feet of stone wall in order to create a suitable driveway, and that activity is exempt from the scenic road because it's along his frontage. So as a result of that, we feel confident that we've satisfied the criteria A. B is grading, and the criteria is that we shall be confined to the existing travel ways presently located within the town right-of-way, and it is intended there will be no change in horizontal or vertical alignment of the existing travel way, and the width of the travel way shall not exceed 12 feet. As I've indicated, and as you can see on the drawing up here, this cross-section identifies the travel way at 12 feet. That's the brown section shown down through here. The green section is, the green line on here is the limits of disturbance. All of it stays within the right-of-way, and it generally tracks the existing travel way with minor changes. All the side slopes would be 2 to 1, which is consistent with the standards, and there would be minor cutting and filling that would be needed to keep this design and get adequate drainage. In accordance with paragraph C, drainage says all drainage work shall direct the water in the natural pattern and existing water courses. Drainage shall not be directed into any new water courses or onto abutting property. We have maintained the drainage pattern with the exception of right here where we're draining it onto Michael Simmons' property, and as I said before, if approved, Michael would grant a drainage easement to the town, which was one of the conditions that Dave Ford requested in his approval letter. D is gates and bars. There shall be no removal of any gates or bars which may be permitted by law when a highway is discontinued, subject to gates and bars, and no gates and bars shall be locked at any time. This portion of the road has no gates and bars that would need to be removed, nor is there any desire for gates and bars to be placed on this road by Mr. Simmons. Paragraph E, stone walls. It says that any damage to stone walls located within the town right-of-way during the course of construction shall be repaired and restored. And the access will create a gap in the, right now there's an existing gap where the driveway is proposed, but to have adequate turning radii, it will be widened. There will be some damage to the wall here where this cross culvert will come in, but that will be repaired as required by the ordinance. We also placed a note on the plans that's called the Historic Stone Wall Precautionary Note, which is on sheet 1 of 3, just so that the contractor will understand the importance of the preservation of the walls and the need for repair. F talks about the board having the ability to waive the criteria A through E above, and we're not seeking any waivers. We just are seeking approval of this design. And G is that the board may request a bond, and we're hopeful that in light of the fact that this is such a gentle sloping and relatively easy improvement, that the board would waive that requirement. And the last thing I guess I would just point out is, so that if you haven't been up there and if these pictures aren't enough, you should be aware that this section of road is very gently sloped. There is no section of this road that even approaches the slope of a handicap ramp, which is 8 1/3%. It's only about 6% in the worst case, with most of this road being about 3%. We've had the entire length of this road reviewed by a certified wetland scientist to determine whether there is any jurisdictional wetlands, and there is none. I believe that covers my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board or the public may have.
Jim, can you show me on that plan where you turned around?
Yes, I turned around right about here.
Okay, so that's just about where the driveway goes in?
It was just slightly beyond where the driveway goes in, right about where the drainage improvement
Okay, thank
was
you.
proposed.
I'll open the public hearing. Members of the public to have questions, comments. Can you just go to the microphone and state your name?
My name is Jay Calvert. I'm one of the abutters. My question just is trying to understand the map. Am I correct that going left, you go to Stoddard Road, and right is continuation of Stoneham? Where does the property end? So the driveway is being proposed for with a slant, the top end of the edge of the property? Yes. Okay. I may have a comment later, but I just wanted to get that clarified. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
My name Stephen Nix. Excuse me, my name's Stephen Nix. I am an attorney representing the Green family, and I do have handouts.
Thank you.
Do you have extra? Well, sure.
Anybody else? With me tonight is Tom Selling, as a professional engineer who has done an independent third-party review of the design, the engineering design. That third-party review was attached as Exhibit A. Also attached to this are the road policy that was the road policy that was readopted, Class 6 road policy that was readopted by the Selectmen in September of 2017. And in that readoption, the Board of Selectmen added the requirement for a public hearing. Otherwise, the policy, from what I could see, was identical to the prior policy from 2017, but I put that in here so the board could have that in their hand as we go through. Just in way of background, the Greens own the land to the north of Stoneham Road in the subject area. The Simmons purchased in 2014, they actually purchased 3 lots, which are shown as lots 9, 10, and 11 on the tax maps, and lots 9 and 10 have frontage on Stoddard Road, which is a Class 5 road. Soon thereafter, they transferred lot 11 into only one of their names, so that the lots are no longer in the same title. And in doing so, they have essentially cut themselves off from the Class 5 portion of Stoddard Road, notwithstanding the fact that Mrs. Simmons owns the other 2 lots. But that's information that is background information. I've also outlined the prior application, which I won't go through. That's all in there. The Class 6 road policy. The applicant's agent reviewed the design criteria, which or the construction standards is the term, which I start on page 8, but the policy actually starts off with a policy evaluation criteria that the Board of Selectmen has adopted and should be used in reviewing these applications. Paragraph 13, and I'm going to try not to read this entire thing, but in order to understand the evaluation criteria, I'm going to read those. Paragraph 13, the condition of the road. Does the road have adequate width, drainage, and grade to handle the increased development? In this particular case, the road is a 2-rod road. It has a 33-foot wide right-of-way, which we found the layout for. The existing traveled way, although as you traverse down the road doesn't have a great grade or a large grade, it is cut into a steep bank. So as you go down the road, on the right-hand side is a very steep bank, some places up to 10 feet tall. And then on the left side, it drops off very steeply as well. So the issue is not necessarily how steep the road is going down, but the way it's cut into the bank. Because there is such a narrow right-of-way, snow storage is a very big issue here. And excuse me just a moment. In the back, there's photographs that I made larger here, but the first photograph is showing the town of Wolfeboro plow stopping at the end of Class 5 road. It goes straight in and then it plows straight in.
You can hold the mic over there if you want. It'll come off. Yeah.
Just pull it straight towards you.
That sounds easier than it is. So this is the a picture of the snowplow, the town snowplow plowing the snow directly into the end of the Class 5 road. There's not enough room within the right-of-way for the snowplow to turn around. The snowplow is currently backing into the green driveway, and it's a permissive use. The Greens have had ongoing communication with Mr. Ford at DPW to give the town plow permission to turn around in their driveway. What happens is there's also not much room to move the snow from one side to the other. So this is a photograph of Mr. Green, who stands something over 6 feet tall, standing in front of that mound of snow at the end of the Class 5 road. And the edges of the road are at the edges of the snowbank. In Mr. Green's, in Mr. Ford's conditional approval, he talks about the removal of the snow. The problem is there's just no place to put it unless you put it on private property. The town comes up and moves snow out of the way using the front end loader on occasion. That's how much snow comes up here. So the issue regarding the width of the right-of-way includes snow. As you go down the road on the right-hand side, there is very little snow storage because of the steep cut bank and the width of the road. As you come back up, going from the north to the south, the snow will basically end up on the Foley land. That is, if it can get by the trees that are being left. Mr. Selling will speak very briefly after me, with the board's permission, regarding the technical aspects of the impacts on stone walls, drainage, and other issues regarding the insufficient width of the road and the right-of-way. Paragraph 14, again getting back to the evaluation criteria, the conditions of connecting roads. Are the roads leading to the Class 6 or private road adequate to handle increased traffic? What I've done is identify the closest crossroad, which is Genis Farm Road, and from the end of the Class 5 portion now, it's approximately 2,200 feet away. The Class 5 Stoneham Road between Genis Farm Road and the end of the Class 5 road is also a two-rod road. It's only 33 feet wide. It is paved, it's passable. It's in pretty good shape right now, but it is only a 33-foot wide road. The town of Wolfeboro road construction standards limit a cul-de-sac to 1,800 feet. The Greens house right now is at about, as I said, 2,200 feet, so it's just a little over what the town would like to see as a dead-end road. This proposal will add another 850 feet to essentially the dead-end road. Stoneham Road does go through. Technically it goes through, but what happens is just after this building site, the road starts down very, very steeply. It's very rocky. It's passable in four-wheel drive vehicles, but that's about it. So essentially this proposal is adding another 850 feet to the dead-end road, making it about a 3,000-foot dead-end road to get to this house. Paragraph 15, effects on municipal services. Will the contemplated development result in a need for increased police, fire, water, sewer, and electrical service? Well, the electrical service is proposed to be underground, and Mr. Selling can speak to that. One of the issues here, it goes back to snow plowing, and what's going to happen here is the town is going to end up with an increased budget, basically, having to deal with backing the trucks out of there. And Mr. Ford has indicated they will do their best not to plow the snow into the road to block it. But that's going to mean that the town plow is going to have to jockey for position and then back down to get out of this area, back down to Genes Hill Road. So there will be an increase in municipal services. Paragraph 16. The next lot that belongs to the Simmons is a hillside lot, and there are potentials there for a view. By the way, the reason that this is the house site is there is a spectacular view up there. That's why they want to come in this way. And it's essentially cheaper than coming up through the other two lots. Well, I don't know whether it is or not, but that's what we see going on here. So there is the potential for another building lot further down. There's also the potential for people who come to the end of the Class 5 road. When a motorist comes to the end of the Class 5 road at this point, they see what is essentially a woods road. It does show up on the GPS as a through road. Some people try to take it, and they've been towed out. But what's there now is a gravel road that's heavily wooded. It's difficult to get through. What this proposal is going to do is create the impression that this town road keeps on going, and the people are going to keep on going, and they're going to get down to the Simmons house, and then they're going to hit that steep bank. And the question is, it's a question of first impression. If this board approves these improvements to a Class 6 road that essentially creates the impression that this is something more than an unmaintained town highway, does the town accept a liability for that? Mr. Simmons has signed a waiver of liability, so he's not going to sue the town, but is a third party who shows up on this road and thinks that it's a town road and keeps on going and falls off the edge. It's only 12 feet wide, there's no shoulders, or gets to the end and can't get out. Are they going to then say, wait a minute, the selectmen approved this? Again, that's a case of first impression. And the selectmen, I believe, need to consider whether that future liability is something that the town wants. How will the proposed development affect neighboring properties, and how well does the proposed development fit in the general growth and development patterns in the town? This particular area is a very rural area. There's only a few houses up there. And I referenced the master plan and the recommendations that the master plan not allow, or excuse me, that this road is designated as a scenic road and its visual quality should be preserved. So in other words, the town recognizes that this is a rural area and it needs to be preserved. What's going to happen is, and Mr. Selling will speak to this, is it's not going to be 16 trees. Essentially, by the time you're done excavating out all the for the road, you're going to be cutting into all of the roots of all the trees. The utilities are going to require a trench that runs the entire length of the road, and they're going to cut through all the roots of the trees. And so the number of trees that are going to be damaged or destroyed in this particular proposal is significantly more than those that are simply situated within the limits of work. Paragraph 18, another criteria is, will the issuance of said building permit tend to distort the town's street map or master plan? Because I'm not familiar with any town in the state of New Hampshire that has adopted a street map. Maybe Manchester has one, but I don't think any town does. But the master plan has been adopted by the town of Wolfeboro and in 2007, and there was an update to the natural resource chapter in 2011, and both of those documents specifically recommend that building permits do not be permitted on Class 6 roads. So simply by reading the master plan and looking this application does not meet the criteria that it will not distort the master plan. Paragraph 19, will the issuance of the building permit place a new financial burden on the town with regards to maintenance and repair of required infrastructure? And this goes to the discussion of when the traveling public gets to the end of the existing Class 5 road and they see that this road is an upgraded road that can be traversed, but will that eventually create a demand and a liability for the town to take over the maintenance of this road? The applicant has not provided any type of maintenance plan. The applicant has not provided any type of evidence indicating that they will provide insurance coverage so that if there is an accident on the road, if there's an accident on this section of the road, who will that person come to? And I'm sure that they'll be coming to the town, they'll be coming to the Simmons, and they may be coming to other abutters as well. So there's an issue here of liability and what the town will ultimately end up accepting for the liability. The policy construction standards, which the applicant's agent reviewed, I'm going to let Mr. Selling review those, except for the issue of gates and bars. The issue of gates and bars is currently in litigation. The Greens are asking the Superior Court in Ossipee to find that they have the right to install gates and bars. But beyond that, the Selectmen may want to take a serious look at this, and just as they did on Trask Mountain Road because of the safety and liability issues, is require that gates be installed on this road as well. Because essentially what's going to happen is the traveling public is going to get there, they're going to think this road goes through, and they're going to keep on going. And I'm going to skip down to the waivers. On the Class 6 road policy, the Board of Selectmen may waive any or all of these requirements when it is the board's judgment that the requirements are unnecessary based on the following criteria. And this is, and one of these criteria is not whether the landowner could build a house or should have a right to build a house on their lot. That's not one of these criteria. And these lots have been wood lots for 200 years. They are sufficient to continue to be wood lots. There is no constitutional right to build a house on a wood lot, and it's not one of the waiver criteria. The criteria do say that the existing conditions do not exceed, it says the maximum standards in A through E above. And Mr. Selling, when he goes through, will show that none of the criteria are met. Every one of them has been exceeded. The improvements would not serve the need of the owner. These improvements are designed specifically to serve only the needs of the owner. The improvements would be detrimental to the maintenance character of the area. Again, the destruction of so many trees is going to significantly change the over to Mr. Selling, unless you have questions.
Good evening. Everybody hear me okay? For the record, my name is Tom Selling with TR Selling Engineering out of Laconia, New Hampshire. When I reviewed the project in light of the Class 6 road policy, I stepped back for a moment and I realized what your policy was trying to say, and that is, it seems like you want to improve a road to make it passable and not change its whole nature and character. And if you go through the various tests in your policy, it seems to suggest that you make some minimal improvements to the road to make it passable to get to in this case, a single-family home. Having said that, you go through the policy standards, the construction standards so-called, and with cutting and clearing, it seems that policy is trying to say they want improvements to be within the travelway. But in the case where certain site conditions require to go a little bit beyond that, it may be using some reasonable judgment, but looking at the existing conditions and comparing them to the proposal. Having said that, you look at the plan, you look at the limits of the cutting and grubbing that are going to take place here. They've marked on a plan where they show the theoretical limits, as minimums, as they describe in their plans, is where the clearing is going to take place. But most engineers have been around road construction for some time, understand that the theoretical minimums aren't going to be met in the field. Case in point, in this case, there's going to be roots that are going to be damaged. And if you look on their plan, they show all the trees on the drawing approximately a 3-foot diameter. So they simply found the edge of the approved line, and then whether or not that line struck a tree or not was indication of whether or not a tree would be removed. And for the point of clarification, their plan actually shows 17 trees being cut. There's an error on their plan, so there's actually 17. And I went through using a standard in the industry in terms of the root impact area with respect to the diameter of a tree. And I plotted that against the limits of clearing on the proposed road improvement plan. And I believe there's going to be an additional 22 trees impacted in this proposal, making a total of 39 trees along this road, which represents 45% of the trees that they surveyed as scenic trees. With respect to other issues when it comes to cutting and clearing, they're proposing 1-foot deep ditches. This is New England. It's going to be a gravel road. You know it's going to be sanded once in a while. The siltation is going to run. It's going to fill these ditches. There's clearly an invitation for those trenches, roadside ditches, to be filled and create a problem. They're only proposing 2-foot wide shoulders. That's going to be clearly going to be an issue with snow plowing, as in the case of scenic trees in proximity to the edge of the road is also going to raise an issue. The plows are going to be hitting those trees and causing further damage. With respect to grading, again, the grading has similar terminology. The grading is to take place within the travelway. There should be no changes to horizontal and vertical alignment. Clearly, the plan shows, in some cases, the vertical alignment changing over 2 feet, and the horizontal alignment not being where the existing Woods Road is today. If they had done an adequate drainage study, what they discovered is, in the course of looking at the existing drainage patterns, they would have realized there's a couple sub-catchments here, or drainage areas affecting this road. Overall, the sheet flow coming off the greens and the adjacent property, sheet flow coming across the road onto Foley land and Simmons land. That hasn't been addressed. What they simply did is they took one big watershed and said, okay, we've generated a certain amount of water. Will the culvert handle that? There was no analysis done whatsoever in terms of the water in the ditch. There's no indication of how much water, how much flowage, and any erosion control protection in that ditch. Another thing to consider, on one of their electrical vault detail shows a 4-inch underdrain. That has to daylight to somewhere, and apparently it's going to flow onto the Foley land. Something else to consider. There's no provisions for how to pick up that extra water. Also on their plan, I believe it's up at station 725 or 750, they do show the limits of clearing going right up to the edge of my client's stone wall. And I think it's extremely unlikely that somebody can cut and grade adjacent to a stone wall and not do some damage to that stone wall. So we're very concerned about that. And then the long-term impacts, if it's not properly resecured and compacted, could be a problem with that stone wall falling in. Another thing that's not reflected in his plans, and I haven't heard it addressed tonight, is respect to there's a very high pile of rocks, approximately station 450 to 550, large boulders that must have come down off of what's now the greenland. Back in the day, the farmer would take the rocks and push them downhill. And I believe what's happened along the Foley land is that there's a pile of rocks that have acted as a retaining wall to hold back this woods road. That hasn't been addressed. When they go and move the road and change the grading along the road, they're going to have to deal with this pile of rocks, created a steep embankment. Again, there's liability issues there, as well as practical construction issues dealing with those boulders and possibly ledge underneath there. Just as a follow-up and a summary, had a thorough stormwater management report been done in compliance with your regulations, I think there'd be a greater appreciation of really the attention that this road needs in order to make it a safe, passable road. You seem to be trying to ask for one standard and using another, and that is, if you're going to make this a passable way for public, it seems reasonable to look at the town's ordinances. And there's a couple critical ones. The stormwater management policy is probably the most important one in sort of guiding the design thoughts here. So had somebody looked at the pre-development issues and compared those to the post-development issues, they would have recognized that there's a need here to pay attention to the detail, to building this driveway, looking at the roadside ditches, and more specifically, I believe there's going to be excessive erosion at the outlet of the culvert they've installed because they haven't done any analysis on it, which I did. And what they're proposing, the stone won't work. It's going to cause further erosion. There's going to be gullies down below the level spreader that they're proposing. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you have of me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
May I, Mr. Chairman? Of course. I was trying to follow the gentleman, but I couldn't quite follow some of your comments. You said something about 33 trees. Are these additional above and beyond the trees?
Right. In the arborist world, and I'm not going to pretend that I'm an arborist by any stretch, but I look at the literature, and it's actually cited, and we've made it an attachment to the attorney's package tonight. There's a rule of thumb. They use a 12-to-1 ratio. Based on the diameter, you then can discern what the probable root diameter is from the trunk. Mm-hmm. I've seen industry, some literature that talks about 40-to-1, but we were conservative. I was conservative. Used the 12-to-1 standard. Using the circumference as surveyed by White Mountain, we then plotted on the impact radius of each of those trees, and I created a chart. Highlighted here in yellow are the 17 trees that were identified as being impacted. Again, there were no criteria in the Ryan's report as to how they came up. We surmised that the dotted line on the plan was simply a place where the line struck the tree, and that was that tree was going to be described as removed or impacted. Using the 12-to-1 ratio, using their trees that they surveyed, they identified each of the circumferences. I then plotted on the radius from the center point of the surveyed trees and see where their dotted line is the impact line, then cross each of my radiuses, conservative radiuses, albeit, to see what the real impact was going to be. And I found 22 more trees. So half of the trees, exactly 45%, I'm rounding off, calling it, half the trees going down this section of Class 6 road are going to be damaged, destroyed, diseased. And it's, the whole nature of that road is going to change dramatically.
Okay. Now, if I may, you mentioned a pile of rocks. Where's this pile of rocks? Is it on the town Class 6 road or on somebody's private property?
Roughly, his road station 450 to 550.
Okay.
I stood there, the pile of rocks were over my head. They had to be 6 to 7.5 feet tall. That's an unofficial, non-engineered retaining wall, which isn't addressed in any of the plan documentation, in any of the previous reports. I believe it's going to be a safety issue.
I have a comment.
Okay.
Chance.
Sure. Dave?
I'd like to address Mr. Silverman. May I do that, our attorney? May I? It seems to me, and I love Stoddard Road, I don't think it's quite as bad a condition as tonight has been said, but I've only been there in my little convertible in the middle of the summer and never in the winter, and it's wonderful. I love North Wolfeboro. It seems to me that the main question here is that the master plan says there are certain wooded areas that do not permit construction. If the Board of Selectmen says it's okay to have construction, does this set a precedent so that anybody else can build a house where they're not permitted? I mean, what are we doing here is what I'd like to know. Can you answer that?
Is that, Mr. Chairman, is that something the board would like to consult with council?
I think we'll discuss that.
I mean, I just didn't want to set a precedent. I mean, it seems to me, if you know about Lake Winnipesaukee, there have been a number of instances where someone has built without a permit a house right near the lake, and instead of tearing it down, the town of Alton has said, okay, you can keep it or something. But in this instance, a house has not been built yet, and I just wonder whether the board would be just opening the gate to anybody who wants to go up to Trask Mountain or North Wolfeboro, say, hey, you know, you permitted this, I insist that you allow me, and I think that to me is more of a major question than whether we're going to uproot a few trees or not. Just the opening a can of worms. End of comment.
Anyone else from the audience that wants to speak? Sir?
My name is Stephen Hyde. I am Mr. Simmons' attorney. And like you, I assume I have read a significant amount of information and a significant amount of documentation prepared by Attorney Nix, many of which are very similar to the one that was provided to you tonight. And without exhausting your time, just trying to hit on some of the high points, primarily with regard to Mr. Selling's presentation, he talked about an industry standard, and included with the document submitted to you tonight is this literature that he referenced. It's also been attached to the appeal that was filed with this board, the Department of Public Works, and the Planning Board. And with those appeals were two other documents. And when it comes to describing the industry standard, we need to figure out what industry the literature talks about. This particular one submitted to you tonight is from Missouri, and it regards the University of Missouri's cooperative extension and discusses specifically the way that trees are treated in Missouri. I've never been to Missouri myself, but I can tell you that having done the research after reading this, it's about 1,300 miles away from here and is a completely different geographic area, has different trees, has different soils, and the like. The other two pieces of literature that were attached to the appeals were from Oregon and deals specifically with the Pacific Northwest, and then the other one was from UC Berkeley and deals obviously with the San Francisco Bay Area. So, for what it's worth, without having the credentials of Mr. Sellings, the fact that they're attaching information to convince you that it's the industry standard that has nothing to do with the geographic area of the part of the country we're in, I think it should be discounted from the get-go. Attorney Nix mentioned many times about snow storage and not enough room to turn around and everything else. This board has already essentially approved this application once before, and it was understood at that time, and it is still the understanding now, that Mr. Simmons is going to take care of plowing to get to his house. The town plows are not going to have to travel any further than they would now, and therefore there's no increase to a budget item or anything else, unless, of course, the Greens decide that because this board has permitted the building of a single-family residence on Mr. Simmons' property, that they're going to withdraw the agreement they have to let the town plows turn around in their driveway. And if that is the case, then the town plows certainly can turn around in Mr. Simmons' driveway, and as you see on the plan, the improvements go beyond the driveway such that a truck could plow to the end of the orange area and then turn around in his driveway. So no harm, no foul there if the town needs a place to turn around. Another issue that was raised, and quite frankly, I think it's raised to scare the board into thinking that there's going to be all sorts of liability. We are not talking about creating a road. The road already exists. This is a Class 6 road in the town of Wolfeboro that has been designated scenic, for the love of God. This is a road that the town decided in 1971, based on a vote of its citizens, that they wanted people to traverse. They want people to go and enjoy. He's made statements that the road is 12 feet wide and therefore it's more dangerous. Yet he started off his presentation saying it's 2 rods wide, which is 33 feet. It cannot be both. It's either 12 or it's 33. Reality is it's 33. He brought up another point, which I think is another red herring among a school of them, and that is that Mr. Simmons and his wife bought 3 pieces of land, 3 separate parcels of land. That is true. They did buy 3 separate large parcels of land, 2 of which front on both Stoneham Road and Stoddard Road, and Lot 11, the one we're talking about, that fronts only on Stoneham Road. And he makes the insinuation that Mr. Simmons is required, because he and his wife own all 3 lots, to cross over the other 2 lots to get to this one. The problem with that is it's clearly not supported by the law. RSA 674-41 does not require that you get an easement from an abutting landowner to access your land, even if you are that landowner. And if you do get that easement, it must comply with 674-41. Considering the easement doesn't exist, it doesn't comply with 674-41, and therefore he's not required to cross over his own land to get to this one. There's been mention of the master plan. The zone here permits the single-family residence. I know that the member of the board was concerned about opening the gates wide to development. It's permitted in the zone. This is not, we're not asking for a variance. It's a permitted use in the zone, and therefore anybody who owns land up there, as long as they comply with the Class 6 road policy, which the application does, are permitted to build their house there. The issue of gates and bars came up, and Attorney Nix is correct. That is an issue that is being litigated before the Superior Court. It's one of the few issues that actually wasn't dismissed by the court. The Class 6 road policy specifically states that removal of gates and bars to build on the lot or to comply with the Class 6 road policy is something to be examined. There are no gates and bars. In fact, there's no right to have gates and bars. If the Greens had a right to install gates and bars, they would have installed them. They know they don't have that right. That's why they asked the court to say that they could do it, which the court hasn't said. Another issue that came up was the fact that these are woodlots. They're not zoned as woodlots. They're not restricted to their use as timber harvesting, and so therefore that's another red herring that we can throw into the net. Mr. Selling also brought up, and I don't mean to attack Mr. Selling in particular, but he brought up issues of watershed and ditches and culverts and everything else, and he's not a person who's certified to do that. Okay, he's not a hydrologist. He indicated that he's not an arborist, and he doesn't have the certification to make those statements, unlike Mr. Rhines, who does. Mr. Rhines, among other accolades and other achievements that he has, is, and I had to look it up because I had no idea what the acronym meant, is a certified professional in erosion and sediment control. So that information and that knowledge has gone into the creation of this plan. Moreover, the plan's been reviewed and approved by this town's Department of Public Works. Now, I mean, I don't know Dave Ford personally, but I know he's pretty darn qualified to do his job, and he's reviewed it and approved it. The other issue that I find concerning overall, in not only what's been presented to you tonight in the presentations and the appeals, both to the court and to the various boards and offices in town, is the underlying element that probably this, and maybe that, and should be this, and could be that. There's no concrete information provided to you in the form of a plan, engineering studies, or anything else. It's merely the opinion of a person who, according to his own website, is an expert witness who lists Attorney Nix as a client who is paid to say what he told you tonight. That is the underlying goal of Nix, of the Greens, and of Mr. Selling, is to convince you of their side of the story. There's been nothing provided to you that even comes close to the time, energy, and study that has gone into the creation of the plans presented. And lastly, and again, I think this is a red herring among the school, Mr. Sellings indicated that there's a big pile of stones and that they are a, quote, unofficial and unengineered retaining wall. And I asked the board to consider that maybe they're just a pile of stones. They're not on the plan because they don't have any impact on the application. This is not a conspiracy to hide the existence of a retaining wall from the Board of Selectmen. It's just another red herring. If you have any questions for me specifically with regard to the litigation or anything I've said, feel free. Hearing that, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Claude Russiger, Wolfeboro. I had only intended to listen tonight, but that doesn't happen very often with me. It's something that Selectman Bowers stated that I think drew my attention as I listened to this. And that was to say the issue isn't all this discussion about the engineering and so forth. The issue is much simpler. The issue is, are we opening the gates for all Class 6 roads if we do this? The other thing which common fairness suggests to me is that when the Simmons purchased these lots, they knew the status of those lots. A lot that does not have access from a Class 5 or otherwise traveled road is not unusual in the town of Wolfeboro. They exist. So they knew full well that access was off a Class 5 road. And then, for whatever reasons, have petitioned for whatever changes, but there was no hardship. When they purchased the lots, they knew what they got and what they needed to do to access it. They can build their house wherever they want to build it, and they can build a driveway to it. So, listening to Selectman Bowers, I'm simply saying I think that's the nub of it, not all the engineering discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Suzanne Ryan, Stoneham Road. One lot removed from the Simmons. To answer or to respond to Mr. Bowers, the difference with this location as compared to some others on Class 6 road is that there is access off another Class 5 road, which is Stoddard Road. They have made a decision to come off the end of Stoneham and go down rather than come off of Stoddard and come up. I don't think you would find as much disapproval if they would come up the other way. We're not saying make an easement through the wife's land. We're not saying make another right-of-way. We're saying come up off of Stoddard Road. It's that simple. They have another alternative, and they've chosen not to use it, and then put the town in the position they're in. I would just comment on a couple of other things. I came to the board on August 3rd, 17th, and September 7th of 2016. And a lot of these questions were raised. I'm glad that the Greens pursued this issue with the board, and I'm glad the board followed up with this hearing, because some of these things could be answered tonight. At one of those meetings, I asked how the road was created. I've been through a stack of town road files. I can't find the answer to that. Although at one of the meetings, it was said that this is a range road. There are all kinds of scenarios about range road, but even if it was range road, does the town have a title to it? Does the town have a deed to it? How is it laid out? We don't have the answers to that. It's never been shown or proven. The other thing along those lines is, the Board of Selectmen just can't, as much as you may wish to, I don't believe that you can make an assurance or make a condition of approval that this road will never be reclassified from a 6 to a 5. There are statutory ways that it can be done. It can be done by petition. It can be done by the Board of Selectmen to lay it out. You might say, well, the townspeople would never vote for that if it was done in a fashion which had to go to town meeting, because some methods don't have to go to town meeting. But the thing of it is there's that betterment clause, and I know you've been dealing with the betterment issue, is that should parties wish to lay it out as a Class 5 road and pay for the cost, the betterment of that cost can be charged to them on an annual basis at the time of tax collection over a period of, say, whatever the selectmen decide, 20 years or something. So there cannot be a definite assurance, and that's part of the problem. We'll be left in flux for who knows how long, until sometimes someone decides, oh, well, I want to develop on the Avery Road, or oh, well, I want to develop on that corner lot that was mentioned, and I don't want to use Stoddard Road. I want to continue on down Stoneham Road. So you've left the neighborhood wondering what next. Some of the issues have been taken care of. I do want to repeat the one about the GPS showing Stoneham as a through road, because although it became a Class 6 road via non-maintenance, which is a good thing, but some people come flying down that road every once in a while, think they can go right on straight through, and they get hung up on the downhill side. But that is a liability once and if you should approve this. This is, if you should approve this is a gradual transformation of a visual and vital landscape, and this is a community pride. North Wolfeboro and Northeast Wolfeboro have many good stewards of land who put many acres into current use, who have tree farms, who have agricultural farms, and it flies in the face of the master plan to open up to development. And also that what was mentioned is that corner lot, the one on Stoddard and Stoneham. Once the Simmons bring the power to their lot, they can drop it to the next lot. Because, by the way, there is no power on Stoddard Road after Ginny Taylor's house, where the animals are. There's no power up until it comes the other way past Mr. Rosinger's. So by allowing the electricity to go to Mr. Simmons' top lot, and since it's all in the family, he just drops it down to the next lot, then that starts to open up this Pandora's box. I have a question that doesn't need answering tonight, but I'm sure it will need to be answered, that was brought up at the planning board and did not receive an answer, is who is going to pay for the maintenance and the underground wiring and electricity should that be needed? And it won't last forever, and things happen. So that was, we didn't get an answer to that. Also at the planning board meeting, for which we couldn't make comment, it had been said by the planning department that there has been some growth in the area. Well, let me talk to growth. We've had 2 houses erected on Stone Road, and we've had 2 houses demolished at the foot of Jennis Farm Road. So there is really 0 growth. Let's see. There is a way to deny the plan without feeling that you've taken sides, and that would simply be deny it and send it to the ZBA under special exception. But should you approve this proposal, I would request, as a person who lives on the street, that there be no street lights on that section of road. We don't have any. I'd hate to see any. That there be dust control on this dirt road. That you set hours of construction when this begins, hours of operation. These trucks are going to travel up and down the roads because there's a lot of soil going to be, material taken out, a lot of material brought in. And that you set a road bond for completion of what they're doing so that the town doesn't get boxed into a corner and be left with something like we did with Wiggins, and that they look into the necessity of bonding if they come up over Jennis Farm Road, which is the shortest way. That's part tar and part dirt. I don't know what damage could be done to that road. And then that the Simmonses, I think this is a law anyway, but the Simmonses be known to the Simmonses, they cannot make any changes to the road without first notifying the town. After this approval, in 5 years, they decide, well, I want to kind of make it go over that way and change it from over that way, that they must notify the town before they do anything. And then the last question, I think is an important question. If you accept this White Mountain plan, are you also accepting and reestablishing the road boundaries? The last comment I have is that Jonathan Hopewell, who lives on Jennis Farm Road, is out in Europe and could not come, but he's in support of the Greens' efforts. And then I have one other item. It's relevant to the historic district. Now, I know some of you know, and were on the board when that brouhaha was about the historic district. However, it was clear, Article 9, petition to abolish the commission. It did not abolish, actually there were 3 votes on it. Your town zoning map still has it outlined as a historic district. Your key to the zoning map quantifies H as historic district. Your ordinance has not been amended to reflect, if you would wish, to abolish the district. It did not. The district was established under 674-46 with town meeting vote, and it clearly established a historic district. It did not establish the commission under that particular vote, which included the area in North Wolfeboro and Stoneham Road. And in that district, there must be a 250-foot setback from the center line of the road for a dwelling if they wish not to look like a historic home or have the facade of a historic home. If they want to build a modern home, they have to move it back. And under 674-46, it's the authority granted for the purpose of the local body, the town, to adopt and have the authority by ordinance to establish a a historic district for change, layout, and define, and a historic district is empowered to regulate construction, alteration, repair, moving, demolition, use of structure. And then, as I say, our very own ordinance was adopted. It's the town zoning ordinance, was adopted under 674. So I think that covers them. And then there is a severability boilerplate clause, which says that if any one of the provisions of this ordinance, that boilerplate is in conflict, it doesn't absolve any of the other provisions. So I'd like to leave this, if I may.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think, Suzanne, you had a classic definition: if it ain't broke, don't fix it, with no street lights changing Class 6 roads to Class 5. And here, as Claude Rossiger pointed out, the people bought a piece of property, not property on it. They bought it just as if I bought an island or a piece of land. They knew what they were buying. They did not have permission, and I think to change things and change roads and whether they might come out another place and so forth, to me, is just so super complicated. And also, as I mentioned earlier, I think it opens up a huge can of worms, because if we granted the Simmonses the right, then if the Joneses or Smiths wanted to do that, they say, look, you established a precedent.
Can I make a comment?
If I may, just very briefly, with regard to the specific issue that Selectman Bowers brought up. While sitting there, I looked at your zoning map and find that the Simmons property is located in the agricultural zone. The agricultural zone permits, obviously has side yard setbacks and everything else, and permits single-family dwellings as well as accessory structures and all the other things that are permitted in the zone. I understand what your point is, Selectman Bowers, with regard to the Simmons knowing what they purchased when they purchased it. They also knew at the time that there was a Class 6 road policy in this town that this board is actually required to follow when the request is made to build on a Class 6 road. That's why the town has the policy, because the laws of the state of New Hampshire require that. So,
they
thank you.
haven't lost anything at all, and it's causing a big brouhaha here with people coming yes, no, whatever. Causing the selectmen to do this, and I consider it to be unnecessary. I think if they had built a house and spent $200,000 on it, and then we could say, okay, speaking for myself, well, I feel sorry for them. Let's let them do it. But they have no investment at all. They have what they bought. If I went and bought a piece of land in off Stoddard Road that had trees on it and everything, and it was not zoned in the master plan for building a house, and I wanted to build a house, I would expect that the people would just say no. I mean, to me, that's simple, but maybe it isn't.
Oh, 1 second, Dave.
Yeah. In all of the information that we've gotten tonight from Attorney Nix, throughout his paraphrasing of everything, he's talking about development. Suzanne talked about development. We're not here for development. We're here for a single-family home permit, period.
Correct.
That's all the Class 6 roads entitles us. That's why they're here.
Correct.
For the building permit of a single-family home.
Absolutely.
And I just, it bothers me a little when I keep hearing development. They can't develop this on a Class 6 road. If the town, as Suzanne said, wants to bring it up to a Class 5, and the town pays to have it done, then they can subdivide and develop it. But they can't.
And if the town ever does...
There is no development here.
Right.
Excuse me. I mean, that's why they're here, is for a permit for a single-family home.
Correct.
That's all.
Absolutely.
But every time I read through this stuff, and I made plenty of notes, there's all these places where they keep saying it's a development. Yeah, maybe it's a single-family home development, but when you start talking development, everybody gets scared that this thing's going to be split up into 10 lots or something. It's not going to happen.
The application is
You
a
can't.
request for the issuance of a
The state
building
does not
permit.
allow you to do that.
Correct.
So we're dealing tonight with a permit for one house on a Class 6 road.
Absolutely.
That's what I'm here to listen to, and that's how I'm going to make my decision, is based on information from both sides.
Yeah.
But
And like
I
I said,
think that, when we start hearing from all these different areas, it looks like somebody's going to start a development here. And I just want to make sure that everybody understands that can't happen.
correct. A retirement
This
home.
is
for the
strictly
Simmons.
a single-family home on a lot on a Class 6 road.
Absolutely.
That's all there is.
That's correct.
That's all we're dealing with, in my opinion, with this application.
That's the only request. And that the town follow their Class 6 road
That's
policy.
right. And we have policies.
Exactly.
We feel that we followed the policies. We have letters from the fire department, from the public works and so forth on different things. And I'm not saying it's all perfect, but I'm just saying the purpose of us here tonight is for that only.
Correct. Absolutely.
The rest of it, development-wise and stuff, understand, it just can't be done. I think people should realize that. That's what we're dealing with.
Absolutely. Appreciate it. Thank you.
If I may, and I'll keep my comments short. First of all, the Greens completely understand that this is an application to upgrade a Class 6 road for a single-family home. The definition of development, the definition of subdivision in the law doesn't use the word development. So I apologize if you have misunderstood the term, but this is a development of a single-family home using a Class 6 road, and the development is, before the board tonight, the development is the upgrade of that Class 6 road. It is not for subdivision purposes. It is very clear in the documents that that's not what it's for. We've also outlined very clearly that the criteria in the road policy have not been met. But having said that, what I'd like to do is address, and I will try to do this without a string of cliches, but I need to reach into that bucket of red herrings and pull a couple out and see if I can clean them up a bit. Number one, Missouri and trees. Anecdotally, I've been to Missouri many times. But my dad was stationed at Fort Riley, Kansas. I lived there for 3 years. In Kansas, which abuts Missouri, they're very similar to us. They have hills, they have deciduous trees, they have pine trees, they have 4 seasons. It snows there. The leaves fall off the trees. It's not some third world country. It's Missouri. So using documents from other states is an acceptable way to show it. And I would just simply ask you to use a little common sense, too. You've all probably dug holes around trees and understand completely well what the limits of the roots are. 2, the counsel for the Greens tonight has actually asked the Board of Selectmen to have the town snowplow plow this road and turn around in the proposed driveway. That was asked tonight, or was offered tonight as a solution to the plow turnaround problem. I have it written down. It's on the tape. If the town, well, I'll just leave it at that. There was a misunderstanding, I believe, by council regarding what a 12-foot traveled way is versus a 33-foot right-of-way. The traveled way are the limits of the actual road, generally where you see the two tire tracks and the gravel and the shoulders, if there are any shoulders. The 33-foot is the legal right-of-way that the town has to work within. They are 2 separate and distinct, and there was no confusion on my part when I used those 2 terms. And if you read very carefully the town road policy, you will see that the 2 terms are used very differently as well. Thirdly, the gates and bars. Council argues that because we asked the court to confirm our right, or the Greens' rights to install gates and bars, that we believe that the Greens don't have the right, and that is completely incorrect. We actually believe that we are going to prevail, and that historically lot owners who own properties abutting roadways can in fact install gates and bars. Mr. Selling is a professional engineer licensed in the state of New Hampshire. Professional engineers are under the 310A statute, are governed, and they are the designers of drainage. Mr. Selling indicated in his report that he has run drainage calculations, and I'll just leave it at that. Well, and Mr. Rhines, regarding attacking Mr. Selling because he's acted as an expert witness, I can tell you that Mr. Rhines has sat across the table from me in depositions and acted as an expert witness on cases. I'm familiar that he's done that on other cases. So it all goes both ways on the expert witness argument. The zoning issue, whether this lot is zoned single-family residential or agricultural, is not one of the criteria that the board would use. It's acknowledged that under the zoning ordinance that if all other things were equal, that a house could be built on this lot. But that's not why we're here. We're here to discuss the Class 6 road policy. And with that, I will end my comments if you have any questions.
Thank you.
I had prepared remarks tonight, but I won't be using them because of Mr. Bauer's question and Mr. Rossinger's comments. But I just would like to go on record. My name's Pamela McKittrick. My husband, Eric Keim, and I live at 515 Stoneham Road. We live in just north of the dead-end sign on Stoneham Road. I just would like to say that if you can say to the Simmons, yes, we will ignore our master plan. You go ahead and cut into our Class 6 road even though you have Class 5 option. How can you ever defend any denial in the future? It's crossing a line that cannot be uncrossed. I urge you not to allow building on the Stoneham Road scenic, dead-end Class 6 road. There's no need to set such a dangerous precedent. We count on our town boards to do what is right for the town, for its beauty and for its character. Please do the right thing.
Thank you.
I just would like to respond to a couple of comments. I don't want to belabor it, but there are a few things that deserve comment. Mr. Rosinger raised a concern that are we opening the gates after listening to Selectman Bowers. The gates are already open simply because you have a Class 6 road policy. If the intent was that we're never going to allow people to build on a Class 6 road, why have the policy? So whether you grant this or not, the gates are open. The Simmons, as it has been said, knew what they were buying, but they did also know there was a Class 6 road policy that allows you to build on them. And this board, perhaps not this exact board, but this town and this Board of Selectmen has approved them before. It's been said by the last speaker as well as Suzanne Ryan that they have other access. Mike Simmons owns a 20-acre lot whose only road frontage is on this Class 6 Stoneham Road. His wife owns other lots on Stoddard Road, but this lot, which could be conveyed to me or anyone else, only has road frontage on Stoneham Road, and that is why they need the relief. There was discussion about when was this road ever laid out, sort of by Suzanne questioning if it's even a road. Well, it was laid out in 1804. There was concern by Suzanne that if this gets improved, is this going to automatically become a Class 6 road or people will petition? This is This is going to be a 12-foot wide, essentially driveway that is improved within the limits of the town's Class 6 road. It doesn't meet road standards of the town. No one could develop on it, as Dave has said. So as far as will all of a sudden, if you approve this, there's options where people can convert this to a Class 5 road if you approve this. Well, if the Simmons do nothing, the town somebody could still petition and say, let's make this a Class 6 road. All of those options and fears that Suzanne was raising are still available, whether anything is done here or not. She mentioned that the people up in North Wolfeboro, the good people up there, are good stewards of the land. They're implying that the Simmons would not be good stewards of the land, and I find that offensive. There has been an enormous amount of discussion about the picture of the snow, and the plowing and the damage. Apparently, the people in North Wolfeboro don't own snow blowers. Snow blowers, you can move snow and blow it out of the way, and whether it comes off the road or if it falls out of the sky on your property, this is New England. We all move snow, and I think that there are other means besides simply snow plowing. There was concerns raised by Mr. Selling about the road would get sanded, the ditches would get plugged. That again assumes that there would be no maintenance done by the Simmons, just as we would all maintain our own driveways. There has been concern about the electric. This electric, there are no trees down the center line of this road, which I've shown you pictures where I comfortably drove down it this evening. Aside from the vault, the lines can be run right down the center line of the road. They raised some concerns about liability. Well, who would I have sued if I got harmed on it tonight? The same people who, if this road gets improved and I got harmed, would be sued. There has been discussion about significant loss of trees, but I find it ironic that the people who have instigated this lawsuit, either they or their predecessors in title, have cut every single tree on their side of the road. There is no trees on their scenic side. There is brush that's grown up, and they probably would like to clear it, and it probably gets maintained on occasion, but it's not going to be right now while this is being litigated. So when you hear how much they love the trees, and we have to be so careful here, they have no trees. That's why they're so concerned. As far as the trees being damaged, and I will tell you that in 40 years of doing land development, constructing roads, absolutely roots are going to get cut. But one thing I learned from arborists are small trees, all trees have a storage in their ecosystem. Small trees have a very small storage, and when they are damaged, they immediately look like they're going to die. But they replenish that quickly, and they come right back. Large trees have an enormous storage, and you can cut their roots, and they'll look good for 2 or 3 years, and then the third year they'll just die. These are all tiny trees, and that's why I do not believe that the impact is going to be nearly as concerning. These trees are used to being in a difficult environment. Their roots are compacted by people driving over it now, and I think we have fairly represented what would be done. There was a concern about possible ledge. I'm not aware of any test pits that were done, but I can tell you the county soil mapping shows no ledge in this area. It's all glacial till. There will certainly be rocks, but they can be dealt with. There was also discussion about the stormwater management plan or ordinance that the town has. That is not applicable to this. That during the hearings, as well as the enabling legislation, which was for site plan review is only applicable to multifamily homes and commercial. It does not apply to single-family residential. During the hearings when that was adopted, there was an enormous concern about the adoption and would that impact everybody who developed and disturbed more than 10,000 square feet. And they were assured over and over and over again that it would not be applicable to single-family homes. The enabling legislation shows that, as well as your policy. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Hi, I wanted to introduce myself. I'm Mike Simmons, and I just wanted to say that what we're asking for may seem a little unusual or out of the ordinary, but what we really want is the same thing that everyone who moves to this area wants, and that's to be part of your community and, you know, have the kind of retirement in this beautiful, beautiful place that we all enjoyed. When I met Debbie back in the 1980s, she spoke of this place and how she'd come up here summer after summer, first camping on a tent platform, and then in the 70s built themselves a little barn. And finally, when Lou and Ellie retired, they built the house on Russ Pond. And it's a reflection of their devotion to this area that we've chosen to come up here and purchase some land and try to follow in their footsteps. We want to be close to family. We want to be close to Bill and Lori. And we want to be part of the community. And I thank you for considering our application.
Thank you.
Jay Calvert again, Stoddard Road. It seems to me that there are two things that that you all can consider, because you are allowed to have restrictions on property when these kinds of applications are made. You've heard enough about the question of whether they could build a driveway onto a Class 5 road, namely Stoddard. I'll let you work through that. Another restriction it seems to me you could consider is, rather than allowing them to put the driveway to the left-hand side, I guess that's south, you could require that it go to the right-hand side. To the extent you required that, a lot of the problems with trees, with snow, with where does the snow go, on whose property, could be ameliorated. So just for your thoughts. On a broader question, we're relatively new to this area, 10 years, 11 years, which means that we're newcomers ourselves, and we're perfectly happy to have the Simmons and others be part of the community. In fact, we welcome that. But to the extent they're asking to change the character of the community, it seems to me that's where you all have to make your decision. And those are just a couple of thoughts of things you might put on to ameliorate the problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Ann Calvert, the other half of Jerry Calvert, owners. We own 148 acres that abut both Stoneham and Avery. But I wanted to speak now as the president of the North Wolfeboro Area Association. One of our missions is to be a neighborhood association, and we absolutely would love to have you as our new neighbors. Our other responsibility as part of our mission is to maintain and protect and preserve the rural and scenic nature of our historic district. To that end, I feel sort of angry that we're being faced with this issue, because with every exception that's made about building on a Class 6 road, it's a precedent for the next time, as others have alluded to. And so it makes it difficult for us to welcome our neighbors when there are issues like this, because when Jerry and I brought our property, we are bounded on one whole side of our property by 2 Class 6 roads. And we were assured that those would stay rural and scenic, and that was our understanding. What is to keep somebody from having a request for the other 2 parcels that are south of them having access to Stoneham as well? Is there a guarantee that that won't happen, and that will not? Then I think we would have a development, not a single-family home. Also, this entire corridor, as you have seen since you've been looking at your property and enjoying it while waiting to build, is a corridor and a home to wildlife, beautiful natural waterways, and so on. And it is a treasure, really, for our town and for people to access for hiking and so on. So I would ask you that when you make these decisions, you consider down the road, it is a slippery slope in many other cases. I do want to take exception about the turnaround capability on that road. A friend of ours from Italy followed her GPS right down Stoneham and ended up hung up on a rock and had to call a tow truck. The tow truck not only couldn't turn around and had to back up the entire length of Stoneham, but he had to take out his saw and cut off tree branches just to get his truck out of there. So thank you for listening tonight.
Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna speak.
My name's Mal Blodgett, Wolfeboro resident and a friend of Mike and Deb's, so that's where my loyalty lies. But that being said, I'd like to, from everything I've heard tonight, it seems like that there is really no exception here that needs to be made. Following the letter of the law, it seems like this should be allowed. I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Once, twice. Public hearing closed. Board? Done there, Brad.
I think because of all the information we've heard tonight, I'm not ready right this minute to make a motion to either approve or deny this.
Okay.
So I would like to have the board talk with our counsel and then make a decision in writing to the applicant. That's what I would prefer to do. I don't know what everybody else thinks.
I'd agree with that. There's a lot of information came out tonight. I think some misconceptions too were brought up and things there that we need to iron out and resolve with some questions to the town council. And I'd agree with Dave. I'd prefer to not sit here and have to make a decision right on the spot right now on it and put it off to another meeting.
I agree that we should make a decision later and determine with our town council and also discussions before then. I think it's very nice. It's a very impressive turnout tonight.
Okay, so that's what we're going to do. I agree with that fully. So I entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion from the board? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Approve.
Thank you.
A motion to go into non-public?